The city bus rumbled down the familiar route, a microcosm of urban life. Inside, a symphony of murmurs, rustling newspapers, and the occasional cough filled the air. Among the diverse tapestry of passengers sat Arthur Hayes, an elderly man who seemed to blend seamlessly into the worn fabric of the seats. His overcoat, though clean, bore the creases of many years, and his quiet demeanor made him easily overlooked. He carried a worn leather satchel, not quite full, and gazed out the window with eyes that held a peculiar depth, as if observing a world both familiar and distant. Arthur was a creature of habit. Every weekday, at precisely 8:30 a.m., he would board the Route 14 bus at the corner of Elm and Maple, taking the same seat by the window. He was never in a hurry, always paid with exact change, and offered a soft, almost imperceptible nod to the bus driver. To most, he was just another elderly commuter, a quiet fixture in the city's daily rhythm. Today, however, his routine was punctuated by an unwelcome disruption. The bus pulled up to a crowded stop, and a young man, sharply dressed in a designer suit and carrying a sleek briefcase, pushed his way through the boarding crowd with an air of entitled impatience. He jostled past Arthur, who, in his unhurried way, was still fumbling for his bus pass. "Come on, old man, some of us have places to be," the young commuter snapped, his voice sharp and dismissive. He glared at Arthur, his face contorted in an expression of self-importance and irritation. "You old folks are always slowing everything down." Arthur flinched slightly, his hand freezing on his pass. He didn't retort, didn't even meet the young man's harsh gaze. Instead, he simply lowered his head, a faint blush creeping up his weathered cheeks. His silence was profound, a dignified retreat in the face of public humiliation. A ripple of discomfort spread through the bus. Some passengers shifted uneasily in their seats, casting sympathetic glances at Arthur. Others pretended not to notice, burying their faces in their phones or staring blankly out the window. The bus driver, a burly man named Frank, with a perpetually weary expression and a cynical view of humanity, remained silent. He merely grunted, pulled the lever to close the doors, and resumed driving, seemingly indifferent to the small drama unfolding behind him. The other bus staff, a young female ticket collector, also kept her eyes fixed forward, a practiced neutrality on her face. Their silence, more than anything else, seemed to amplify the young man's harsh words. The young commuter, having successfully asserted his perceived superiority, then loudly complained into his phone about the inefficiency of public transport and the impediments he encountered daily. His voice grated on the nerves of many, but no one dared to challenge him. Arthur, meanwhile, managed to find his pass and quickly scanned it, then settled back into his seat, becoming once again a silent, almost invisible presence. But the incident had cast a lingering shadow over his familiar ride. He kept his gaze fixed on the passing buildings, his profile etched with a quiet sadness that belied his calm exterior. The injustice of the moment, the casual cruelty of the young man's words, hung in the air, a sour note in the morning commute. He was a man who carried his burdens silently, a habit forged by a lifetime of unseen struggles. His worn overcoat, his careful movements, his quiet solitude, they all spoke of a life lived on the fringes, far from the spotlight. No one on that bus knew him, or his story. No one knew the true depth of his dignity, or the monumental secret he carried within him. And as the bus continued its journey, Elias Thorne, the CEO, remained unaware that this seemingly ordinary old man, just publicly reprimanded, held a key to a profound revelation that would shake the very foundations of the city. So to 6 samam jangcho tiep tuk chuang do. Suyu. Chuang tu, a glimpse of the unseen. Among the indifferent faces on the bus, one pair of eyes had lingered on Arthur Hayes, observing him with a keen, compassionate gaze. Chloe, a young journalist with a small independent online publication, had witnessed the uncomfortable exchange. Unlike the other passengers who quickly looked away, Chloe's professional curiosity, coupled with a deep-seated empathy, kept her focus on the elderly man. Chloe was in her late 20s, with bright, intelligent eyes that missed little. She wasn't chasing sensational headlines. Her passion lay in uncovering the quiet stories, the hidden narratives of ordinary people that often held the most profound truths. She saw the familiar weariness in Arthur's posture, a quiet dignity in his silence that spoke volumes. The young commuter's callous remarks and the staff's passive indifference had bothered her, stirring a sense of injustice. As the bus continued its route, Chloe pretended to read a book, but her attention remained fixed on Arthur. She noticed the way he clutched his satchel, not protectively, but almost habitually, as if it contained something precious yet unassuming. She observed his gaze, which, rather than focusing on the passing traffic, seemed to drift to the city's older buildings, lingering on their architectural details with a subtle wistfulness. When the bus finally pulled up to Arthur's stop, far from the bustling downtown, Chloe made a split-second decision. She swiftly gathered her bag, mumbled a quick apology to a startled passenger, and disembarked just as Arthur stepped onto the sidewalk. She kept a discreet distance, allowing him a head start, her journalist's instincts tingling. There was more to this man, she felt, than met the eye. His quiet resilience, the almost profound sadness in his gaze, combined with the staff's odd passivity during the incident, hinted at a story waiting to be uncovered. Arthur walked slowly, but with a steady, unhurried pace. He seemed to favor one leg slightly, a subtle limp that suggested old injuries or the simple toll of age. He didn't look back, his focus seemingly on his destination. Chloe followed him through a quiet residential neighborhood, where old oak trees arched over cracked sidewalks and houses wore the comfortable patina of decades. This was a stark contrast to the sleek, modern glass towers of the city center, a place where time seemed to move at a slower, more deliberate rhythm. Finally, Arthur turned onto a narrow, tree-lined street and approached a modest, slightly run-down house. Its paint was faded, and the garden, though neat, held more weeds than flowers. It was a humble abode, a world away from the luxury and excess often portrayed in her profession. Arthur fumbled with a set of keys, the simple metal jingling softly in the quiet afternoon. He opened the door and disappeared inside. Chloe waited for a moment, then cautiously approached the house, keeping to the shadows of the old trees. She found a spot behind a thick azalea bush that offered a clear, yet discreet view into one of the ground-floor windows. The curtains were slightly ajar, revealing a glimpse of Arthur's world. The room was simply furnished, almost Spartan. An old armchair, a small wooden table cluttered with books, and a worn rug covered the floor. It was clean, meticulously so, speaking of a life lived with careful frugality. Arthur, having removed his overcoat, sat at the table, his movements slow and deliberate. He poured himself a cup of tea from a chipped mug and opened his satchel. From the satchel, he carefully extracted a few items. There was a worn, leather-bound book, its pages yellowed with age. He turned them slowly, his fingers tracing the faded text. Then, he pulled out a small, wooden box. Inside, Chloe could just make out a handful of old, sepia-toned photographs. Arthur picked one up, his gaze softening as he looked at it, a faint smile playing on his lips. It was a picture of a younger man, with a vibrant, hopeful look in his eyes, standing beside a woman with a kind smile. Then, Arthur produced something else, a roll of paper, tied with a simple string. He carefully unrolled it on the table, smoothing out the creases. It was a faded blueprint, detailed and intricate. Chloe strained her eyes, trying to discern the lines and symbols. As Arthur leaned closer to examine it, his finger tracing a particular curve, Chloe's breath hitched. Her journalistic mind instantly recognized the distinctive architectural style, the sweeping curves, the unique structural elements. It was undeniably a design for the city's iconic Central Library, a landmark she had admired countless times. The library, a beacon of knowledge and a masterpiece of urban design, had always been attributed to the celebrated, now-deceased architect, Mr. Harrison. But the blueprint in Arthur's hand was not signed by Harrison. It bore a different, almost illegible signature, faded with time. A jolt of pure adrenaline shot through Chloe. The humble old man, the one admonished on the bus, was holding a blueprint of one of the city's most famous buildings. The pieces, though disjointed, began to click into place, hinting at a hidden story, a forgotten connection that defied the official narrative. The silence of the bus staff, the young man's casual cruelty, Arthur's quiet dignity, it all seemed to lead to this glimpse of the unseen, a mystery waiting to be unraveled. Chloe knew, with an unshakable certainty, that she had stumbled upon a story far larger than a simple bus incident, a story that held the promise of revealing a profound injustice and reclaiming a forgotten legacy. Chloe's heart pounded with a mix of adrenaline and journalistic fervor. The sight of Arthur holding the blueprint of the Central Library was the definitive hook she had been searching for. The city's iconic landmark, a symbol of civic pride and architectural brilliance, was attributed solely to the late Mr. Harrison, a celebrated figure whose name adorned plaques and history books. But the blueprint in Arthur's hand, with its faded, illegible signature, whispered of a hidden truth, an echo from a distant past. She returned to her small, cluttered apartment, her mind ablaze with possibilities. Her tiny desk, usually buried under stacks of notes and half-finished articles, became her war room. She pulled up every digital archive she could access, searching for information on the Central Library's construction, on Mr. Harrison, and on any lesser-known figures connected to the project from decades ago. Her initial searches yielded nothing unusual. Harrison was indeed lauded as the sole genius behind the library. The official narratives were pristine, unblemished. But Chloe knew better. The best stories, the most profound injustices, were often buried under layers of officialdom and carefully constructed public images. She broadened her search, digging into old newspaper clippings, university records, and even public records from the time of the library's construction. It was painstaking work, sifting through mountains of mundane information. Days bled into nights, fueled by strong coffee and an unshakable sense of purpose. Then, she found it. A tiny, almost insignificant article buried deep within a forgotten section of the city archives, dating back nearly 3 decades. It was a short piece about a young, promising architect named David Reynolds. The article praised his innovative designs, his unconventional approach to urban planning, and specifically mentioned his ambitious proposal for a new central library, lauded by a few progressive critics as visionary. However, the article ended abruptly, stating that Reynolds had mysteriously withdrawn from the project and relocated due to personal reasons. The project had then, almost immediately, been taken over by the more established and politically connected Mr. Harrison. Chloe felt a jolt of recognition. David Reynolds. The name was vaguely familiar from her architectural history classes. A footnote, a promising talent who had inexplicably vanished from the scene. Was he the man in the faded photograph Arthur held? Was his the illegible signature on the blueprint? She cross-referenced everything. The dates of Reynolds' disappearance aligned perfectly with the start of the library's construction under Harrison. She found academic papers from Reynolds that showcased a unique design philosophy, one that mirrored the very architectural elements she had admired in the library and recognized in the blueprint from Arthur's house. Her research also uncovered whispers, long-forgotten rumors from academic circles of the time, whispers of a brilliant but naive young architect, of a powerful rival, and of a project that was too valuable to be left to an unknown talent. There were hints of a scandal, of a sudden, unexplained collapse of Reynolds' career, and a rapid rise of Harrison to prominence directly afterward. Chloe then focused on any connection between David Reynolds and Arthur Hayes. It took even longer, sifting through census records, old phone directories, and community archives. Finally, she found a small mention in a university yearbook, Arthur Hayes. listed as David Reynolds' closest friend and assistant during their university years. A quiet, dedicated student who often helped Reynolds with his intricate models and drawings. They had shared a small apartment near the university, their names listed side by side in old utility bills. The puzzle pieces began to fit, forming a devastating picture. Arthur Hayes, the seemingly ordinary old man on the bus, was more than just a quiet commuter. He was likely the last living link to David Reynolds, the uncredited genius behind the city's beloved library. The legacy of deception began to unravel. The narrative was clear. David Reynolds, a brilliant but perhaps vulnerable architect, had created the groundbreaking design for the Central Library. Mr. Harrison, a powerful and unscrupulous figure, had somehow orchestrated Reynolds' disappearance or disgrace, stealing his work and claiming it as his own. Arthur, as David's loyal friend and assistant, must have known the truth, perhaps even witnessed the betrayal. Chloe felt a surge of anger. The thought of a talent being stolen, a life's work appropriated, and an injustice left uncorrected for decades, fueled her determination. The dignified silence of Arthur on the bus, his almost melancholy gaze at the city's old buildings, suddenly made profound sense. He wasn't just observing, he was living with the weight of a monumental secret, the quiet witness to a betrayal that had never seen the light of day. This wasn't just a story for her small online publication. It was a bombshell, a historical revision that would shake the city to its core. It would challenge the established narrative, expose a revered figure, and, most importantly, bring justice to a forgotten genius and, perhaps, to the silent man who had carried the burden of his friend's stolen dream for so long. Chloe knew she had to approach Arthur with extreme caution, but she also knew she could not, and would not, let this truth remain buried. Chloe's apartment had become a whirlwind of old documents, digital files, and a growing sense of righteous indignation. The more she dug, the clearer the picture became of a brilliant young architect, David Reynolds, whose genius was undeniable, and a powerful, unscrupulous figure, Mr. Harrison, whose ambition knew no bounds. The blueprint in Arthur's hands wasn't just a design. It was a physical testament to a profound betrayal, a stolen dream that had silently festered for decades. Her research now focused on the dynamics between David Reynolds and Arthur Hayes. University records, old photo albums from student clubs, and even a few dusty alumni newsletters painted a picture of an inseparable bond. They were kindred spirits, two young men with a shared passion for architecture, though with vastly different temperaments. David, charismatic and visionary, was the creative force. Arthur, quiet and meticulous, was the steady hand, the loyal confidant who translated David's grand ideas into precise, workable drawings. Their friendship was a partnership built on mutual respect and shared dreams. Chloe unearthed snippets of their early careers. After graduation, they had started a small, idealistic firm, aiming to design buildings that served the community, not just the elite. Their proposal for the Central Library had been David's magnum opus, a revolutionary design that envisioned the library as a communal heart for the city, a place of light and learning for all. It was audacious, ahead of its time, and caught the attention of both progressive critics and powerful figures, including Mr. Harrison. Harrison, already a well-established architect with significant political connections, had initially feigned mentorship. He invited David and Arthur to meetings, praised David's vision, and spoke of collaborating on the grand project. But beneath the veneer of generosity lay a poisonous greed and envy. Harrison saw the potential for immense fame and wealth in David's design, and he coveted it with a singular ruthlessness. Chloe found old legal documents that hinted at a swift, brutal campaign against David, baseless accusations of financial mismanagement, fabricated intellectual property disputes, and veiled threats against his and Arthur's burgeoning careers suddenly appeared. David, young and naive, found himself caught in a legal and reputational quagmire, orchestrated by Harrison's powerful network. The articles from that period, once praising David, suddenly turned disparaging, painting him as erratic, unreliable, and even unstable. His small firm collapsed under the weight of the fabricated scandal. Arthur, as David's closest friend and partner, bore witness to every step of the betrayal. He had tried to fight, to defend David's honor and their shared work, but they were no match for Harrison's influence. Chloe discovered a harrowing detail, a sealed court document from a private arbitration hearing, buried deep in a little-known public archive. It revealed that Harrison had offered David a paltry sum for the rights to his designs, threatening to completely destroy his reputation and career, and even to implicate Arthur in fabricated legal troubles if he refused. Faced with ruin and the threat to his friend, David had signed away his masterpiece, his spirit crushed. David had then vanished, leaving the city in despair, his dream stolen, his name tarnished. Arthur, too, had disappeared from public view, unable to continue practicing architecture, his heart broken by the injustice. He quietly took on odd jobs, living a life of anonymity, forever burdened by the knowledge of the truth. He carried the weight of a stolen dream, a silent guardian of a legacy that belonged to another. The faded blueprint in his modest home wasn't just a memory, it was a testament to the life he had once shared with his friend, a dream that Harrison had violently ripped away. The bus incident, the young commuter's rude remarks, the indifference of the bus staff, they all suddenly acquired a new, profound meaning. Arthur wasn't just an old man being slow. He was a dignified soul carrying the weight of a monumental, uncorrected injustice. His silence wasn't weakness. It was the quiet fortitude of someone who had endured unimaginable pain and betrayal. Someone who knew the true cost of power and the silence it could enforce. Chloe felt a surge of cold determination. This wasn't just a story. It was a mission. She had uncovered a hidden history, a dark stain on the city's celebrated past. She had to bring this truth to light, to reclaim David Reynolds' rightful place in history, and to lift the heavy burden of silence from Arthur Hayes. The memory of Arthur's quiet dignity on the bus, juxtaposed with the casual cruelty of the young commuter and the passive silence of the staff, fueled her resolve. She knew she was holding a story that would not only expose a villain, but also restore honor to a forgotten hero and bring a form of justice, however belated, to a man who had lived with a stolen dream for decades. Chloe felt the weight of the story she had uncovered settling heavily upon her. It was more than just a journalistic scoop. It was a profound injustice, a human tragedy that had played out in the shadows for decades. The meticulous research had revealed a close, unwavering bond between Arthur Hayes and the disgraced architect, David Reynolds. They weren't just colleagues. They were brothers in spirit, bound by a shared passion and a dream that was brutally stolen. Her office, usually a beacon of vibrant energy, now felt like a solemn archive of a forgotten past. Old photographs, scanned documents, and faded newspaper clippings were spread across her desk, each piece a fragment of a life unjustly sidelined. She saw pictures of a young, vivacious David, his eyes alight with creative fire, often with a quieter, more reserved Arthur by his side, a loyal shadow supporting his friend's brilliance. Chloe's research painted a vivid picture of Harrison's insidious manipulation. He was a man of immense charm and ruthless ambition, a master of deception. He had first approached David and Arthur under the guise of mentorship, praising David's groundbreaking design for the Central Library. He had woven himself into their trust, subtly extracting details, gaining access to their blueprints and models. Then came the turn. Chloe found evidence of Harrison's carefully orchestrated campaign to discredit David. He used his extensive network and political influence to plant false rumors about David's financial instability and emotional erraticism. Old articles detailed how David's firm began to face sudden, insurmountable legal challenges, seemingly out of nowhere. Unexplained building code violations appeared, permits were mysteriously revoked, and small, fabricated lawsuits began piling up. It was a suffocating net, meticulously designed to trap a young, unsuspecting talent. The emotional toll on David must have been immense. Chloe discovered a series of letters from David to a former professor, written in a hand that grew increasingly desperate and frantic. He spoke of feeling hunted, of inexplicable obstacles, and of his growing fear that Harrison was actively working to ruin him. He mentioned Arthur as his only constant support, the one person who still believed in him. The climax of Harrison's betrayal, Chloe found, was a brutal meeting orchestrated by Harrison's lawyers. David, already on the brink of financial and emotional collapse, was presented with an ultimatum sign over all rights to his library designed to Harrison, or face a public scandal that would not only destroy his career but also implicate Arthur in fabricated financial irregularities, ensuring neither of them would ever work in architecture again. It was a vicious choice: sacrifice his masterpiece or condemn his closest friend. David, heartbroken and defeated, had made the agonizing decision. He signed. He sold his soul, his dream, for a pittance, knowing that doing so was the only way to protect Arthur. The agreement was airtight, legally binding, designed to completely erase David's contribution and silence any future claims. The terms were harsh, forcing David into a permanent retirement from architecture and a strict non-disclosure agreement. Arthur, as David's closest friend and assistant, bore witness to this devastating betrayal. Chloe found records that Arthur had been present at that final, humiliating meeting. He saw the light drain from David's eyes as he signed away his legacy. The pain of that moment, of seeing his brilliant friend crushed by such injustice, must have been unbearable. After signing the agreement, David vanished from the city, fulfilling the terms of the deal. He retreated to a secluded life, never to design again, his spirit broken. Arthur, unable to pursue his own architectural aspirations without betraying David's memory, or perhaps simply too heartbroken to continue, also faded into obscurity. He found work as a quiet, unassuming clerk, carrying the weight of a stolen dream for decades, his meticulous care for the blueprint, for the old photographs of David, was not just nostalgia. It was the silent battle of the past, a lonely vigil for a truth that had been systematically suppressed. The everyday indignities Arthur faced, the young commuter's sneer, the bus staff's indifference, suddenly seemed insignificant against the backdrop of such monumental suffering. He wasn't just a slow old man. He was a silent keeper of a devastating secret, a man who had sacrificed his own future and endured countless indignities to protect a friend's last shred of dignity. The cost of that silence had been immense, shaping his entire life into a quiet, dignified endurance. Chloe felt a profound surge of empathy and a fierce determination. This story was more than a revelation. It was an act of justice long overdue. She had gathered enough irrefutable evidence. She knew what she had to do next. It was time to give a voice to the silent witness, to expose the truth that had been buried for too long, and to reclaim the legacy that rightfully belonged to David Reynolds and, in a way, to Arthur Hayes himself. Chloe felt the weight of the past pressing down on her, the decades of injustice a tangible burden. She had meticulously compiled every piece of evidence: David's original blueprints, the falsified legal documents, the old news clippings, and the compelling timeline of Harrison's rise mirroring David's fall. The story was ready, a powerful narrative of ambition, betrayal, and a stolen legacy. But before she could publish, she knew there was one crucial step left to confront Arthur Hayes himself. He was the silent witness, the guardian of a truth he had carried alone for far too long. She found Arthur at his usual bus stop, just as the morning commute was beginning to swell. He stood there, his worn overcoat a familiar silhouette, his gaze fixed on the approaching bus. Chloe approached him slowly, respectfully, her heart thumping with a mix of apprehension and determination. "Mr. Hayes," she began, her voice soft but clear. Arthur turned, his eyes, usually distant, sharpened slightly with recognition. He remembered her, the young woman who had watched him on the bus. "Yes," he replied, his voice a gentle rasp. Chloe took a deep breath. "My name is Chloe, and I'm a journalist. I've been researching the history of the city's central library, and I believe I've uncovered something significant about its true architect, about David Reynolds." Arthur's composure, usually unshakable, fractured. His eyes widened, and a tremor ran through his hand as he clutched his satchel. "David Reynolds," he repeated, his voice barely a whisper. The name, unspoken for so long in public, hung in the air between them like a ghost. Chloe nodded, her gaze unwavering. "Yes, I believe he was the true genius behind the library's design, and that his work was stolen by Mr. Harrison. I have proof, Mr. Hayes, and I believe you know the truth." She then pulled out a carefully selected copy of the faded blueprint he had kept, as well as the old photo of him and David, showing them to him. "This is yours, isn't it? And this is you and David." Arthur looked at the documents, then back at Chloe, his eyes filling with a mixture of disbelief and profound sadness. The dam of his silence, built over decades of fear and loyalty, began to crack. He led her to a nearby park bench, his movements slow, deliberate, as if each step carried the weight of his untold story. There, under the dappled light of the morning sun, Arthur finally broke his silence. His voice, initially hesitant, grew stronger as he recounted the heartbreaking tale of David's brilliance, Harrison's ruthless envy, and the cruel ultimatum that had forced David to sign away his masterpiece. He spoke of the threats, the fear of ruin, and David's ultimate sacrifice to protect them both. Arthur described the pain of watching his friend disappear, his spirit broken, and the agony of carrying the burden of that secret alone. "I saw it all," he confessed, tears finally streaming down his weathered face. "Every detail of the betrayal. I wanted to speak, but Harrison's power, it was immense. He threatened to destroy me too, to ensure David's name would be forever tarnished." His story was a testament to loyalty, sacrifice, and the crushing weight of injustice. Chloe listened, her own eyes brimming with tears, her heart aching for the silent suffering this dignified old man had endured. The full, heartbreaking scope of the deception was finally laid bare. As Arthur poured out his soul, an unrelated yet crucial drama was unfolding back at the city bus company. The video of the incident where the young commuter had admonished Arthur had gone viral. A passenger, secretly filming the interaction, had posted it online, sparking outrage among viewers who decried the commuter's rudeness and the bus staff's apparent indifference. The video, initially a small ripple, had become a tsunami, engulfing the bus company in a public relations crisis. The CEO of the Transit Authority, Mr. Davies, a man known for his strict professionalism but also his concern for public image, launched an immediate investigation. He summoned the bus driver, Frank, and the ticket collector, demanding an explanation for their inaction. Frank, gruff and defensive, tried to downplay the incident, reiterating his cynical view of passengers. The ticket collector, nervous, admitted she had been uncomfortable but hadn't known how to intervene. Just as the internal investigation was reaching a stalemate, Chloe, armed with Arthur's full confession and all her compiled evidence, decided it was time to make her move. She strategically leaked a portion of her findings to a larger, more prominent news outlet, while preparing her full exposé for her own publication. The leaked snippet hinted at the true identity of the old man on the bus and his connection to the city's iconic library. The effect was instantaneous and electrifying. The news outlet, intrigued by the tantalizing hint, began its own rapid investigation, quickly confirming elements of Chloe's leak. The whispers of the Central Library's true architect began to spread like wildfire. The bus company's PR crisis suddenly escalated into a full-blown inferno. The news reached Mr. Davies' office like a lightning bolt. He saw a brief report on a major news channel, showing a blurred image of Arthur Hayes, linked to the Central Library. He immediately ordered his team to find out everything about this man. When the full truth about Arthur Hayes, as David Reynolds' trusted confidant and the silent bearer of David's stolen legacy, reached the bus company's management, their staff, particularly Frank and the ticket collector, were stunned into silence. The man they had dismissed as merely an old, slow commuter, the target of a rude passenger, was connected to one of the city's greatest architectural mysteries, a man who had silently endured a monumental injustice. The indifference they had shown on the bus now twisted into a knot of shock and shame in their stomachs. The casual cruelty of the young commuter took on a monstrous dimension. The unveiling had begun. The truth, long buried, was finally seeing the light of day, threatening to rewrite history and expose the darkness beneath the city's gleaming facade. Justice, though decades delayed, was finally on the horizon. The news exploded. Chloe's carefully orchestrated expose, published by her online platform and amplified by major news outlets, ripped through the city like a wildfire. Headlines screamed, "City's iconic library built on a lie, true architect's work stolen." Decades ago, and humble bus commuter revealed as witness to architectural betrayal. The story detailed David Reynolds' visionary talent, Harrison's ruthless machinations, and Arthur Hayes' decades-long burden of silence. The photographic evidence, the legal documents, and Arthur's poignant confession painted a damning picture of a revered public figure built on stolen glory. The city was in an uproar. Admiration for the Central Library turned to outrage over the injustice. Public opinion swung dramatically, fiercely, in Arthur's favor. He was no longer just the old man on the bus. He was a silent hero, a keeper of truth, whose dignity in the face of insult now seemed almost prophetic. Meanwhile, the bus company, already reeling from the viral video of the incident, was plunged into a full-blown crisis. Mr. Davies, the CEO, his face ashen, watched the news reports play out in his office. He had known Arthur Hayes was the man in the video, but the revelation of his true identity and his connection to such a monumental scandal was unfathomable. He immediately summoned the staff involved. Frank, the bus driver, entered the office, his usual gruff demeanor replaced by a pale, stunned expression. The young ticket collector, her eyes wide with disbelief, followed him. "Do you two understand what's happening?" Davies' voice was tight with suppressed fury. "That old man you saw fit to ignore, the one you let that arrogant young man bully, that was Arthur Hayes, David Reynolds' closest friend, the man who witnessed the theft of the Central Library's design, the man whose silence has now spoken louder than any scream." Frank's face crumpled. He remembered the commuter's harsh words, his own weary indifference. I just thought he was another slow old man. Sir, I didn't know." His voice was barely a whisper, thick with disbelief and a creeping sense of dread. The casual cruelty he had allowed, the simple dismissal of an elderly passenger, now stood exposed as a profound moral failing. The ticket collector burst into tears. "I felt bad, Mr. Davies, I really did. But he was so loud, and I didn't want to cause a scene." Her excuse, flimsy even to her own ears, now sounded pathetic in the face of the magnitude of Arthur's silent suffering. Davies slammed his hand on the desk. "A scene? You think what we have now isn't a scene? This company's reputation is being dragged through the mud because of your inaction, your indifference. The public is demanding answers. They want to know why a man who carried such a heavy burden for decades was met with such disrespect on our bus." The silence of shame hung heavy in the room. Frank and the ticket collector stood, unable to meet Davies' gaze, or their own reflections. The indifference they had cultivated as a coping mechanism for their monotonous jobs had, in this instance, become complicity in a greater injustice. Their failure to intervene, to show basic human kindness, was now highlighted by the extraordinary story of the man they had dismissed. The media, sensing blood in the water, descended on the bus company. Reporters hounded employees, demanding statements. The video of the incident played on an endless loop, now with overlaid captions identifying Arthur Hayes as the unsung hero and the young commuter as the arrogant bully. The public outrage was immense, demanding accountability. The consequences were swift and severe. Mr. Davies, to salvage the company's image, announced immediate disciplinary actions. Frank and the ticket collector faced suspension, mandatory sensitivity training, and a formal review of their conduct. It was a harsh lesson, a public reckoning for a moment of quiet neglect. Chloe's exposé had not only revealed a decades-old injustice, but it also sparked a citywide conversation about compassion, respect for the elderly, and the hidden struggles of seemingly ordinary people. Harrison's once revered name was now synonymous with deceit and treachery. His surviving family, shocked and disgraced, issued a terse statement denying knowledge of the scandal, but the public largely dismissed it. Arthur Hayes, meanwhile, found himself thrust into an unexpected spotlight. Reporters flocked to his modest home, seeking interviews. He remained, as ever, a man of quiet dignity. He spoke softly, not with bitterness, but with a calm resolve, recounting David's genius and Harrison's betrayal. His humility only amplified the public's admiration. The city was rocked by the revelation. Plaques bearing Harrison's name were swiftly removed from public buildings. Petitions circulated, demanding that the Central Library be officially reattributed to David Reynolds. The truth, long suppressed, had finally emerged, and its reverberations were shaking every corner of the city, bringing an unprecedented reckoning for those who had benefited from deceit, and a long-overdue spotlight on the quiet courage of those who had carried the burden of it. The stage was set for the final act, the reclamation of a stolen legacy, and the pursuit of a long-delayed justice. Chuang 8. The Blueprint of Forgiveness. The city breathed a collective sigh of relief, then erupted in a wave of restorative action. The public outrage over the injustice done to David Reynolds and Arthur Hayes quickly galvanized into a powerful movement for redress. The true story of the Central Library's creation, once buried by ambition and deceit, was finally being etched into the city's historical narrative. The City Council, reeling from the scandal and under immense public pressure, issued a formal public apology to the late David Reynolds, to Arthur Hayes, and to the citizens for the decades of deception. A special committee was formed to officially reattribute the Central Library's design to David Reynolds. Plaques bearing Harrison's name were swiftly and ceremoniously removed, replaced by new ones honoring David's genius and acknowledging Arthur's unwavering loyalty. The bus company, still battling its public relations nightmare, took immediate and decisive action. Beyond the disciplinary measures for Frank and the ticket collector, Mr. Davies, the CEO, implemented a comprehensive sensitivity training program for all staff, emphasizing respect for all passengers, especially the elderly and vulnerable. He issued a heartfelt public apology on behalf of the company, acknowledging their failure to uphold basic human decency in the bus incident. The incident, though painful, became a catalyst for positive change within the transit system. Arthur Hayes, the quiet old man, found himself thrust into an unexpected yet ultimately healing spotlight. He continued to live in his modest home, but his days were no longer shrouded in anonymity. He received countless letters of support and admiration from citizens, architects, and historians. He was invited to speak at universities and community events, sharing David's story and, for the first time, openly recounting his own quiet burden. He spoke not with bitterness, but with a gentle dignity, emphasizing the importance of truth and the power of perseverance. The city organized a grand rededication ceremony for the Central Library. It was a momentous occasion, attended by thousands, including the mayor, city council members, and a humbled Mr. Davies. A towering bronze statue of David Reynolds, holding a blueprint, was unveiled in the library's courtyard. A smaller, yet equally significant, a plaque beneath it read, "Dedicated to the enduring genius of David Reynolds, and to the quiet courage and loyalty of Arthur Hayes, who kept his memory alive." Arthur stood beside the mayor, his eyes moist, a faint smile gracing his lips. He finally saw David's dream fully realized, his friend's legacy reclaimed. The weight he had carried for so long, the burden of a stolen dream, finally lifted. It wasn't about fame or fortune for Arthur. It was about justice. It was about ensuring that David, his brilliant friend, was remembered for his true contribution. In the aftermath, Arthur chose to live out his days in quiet contentment. He continued his daily bus rides, but now the driver and staff greeted him with genuine warmth and respect. Passengers often offered him their seats, or simply a kind word. The young commuter from the original incident, his identity widely known through the viral video, faced public backlash and professional repercussions. He issued a public apology to Arthur, which the old man quietly accepted, offering a silent gesture of forgiveness. Chloe, the journalist, received national recognition for her groundbreaking exposé. Her career flourished, but she never forgot the humble beginnings of the story. She visited Arthur often, becoming a trusted friend, ensuring his story continued to inspire. Arthur Hayes passed away peacefully a few years later, a man who had lived a life of quiet dignity and remarkable resilience. His story became a legend in the city, a poignant reminder that true heroes are often found in the most unexpected places, carrying unseen burdens, and that truth, no matter how long it takes, always finds a way to shine. The Central Library, a testament to David Reynolds' vision and Arthur Hayes' unwavering spirit, stood as a permanent symbol of a legacy reclaimed and justice finally served, ensuring that no dream, however stolen, would remain buried forever. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story and want to see more, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Stay with us for the next one, and while you're here, check out our other videos. There's always more to explore. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments below.